Welcome, educators. Whether you are a spreadsheet, dashboard, all things data fanatic like myself, or you break out into a cold sweat just hearing the words data meeting, it's okay. I've got you. My name is Jessica Lane, and I'm your host for this podcast, Data in Education. I'm also the founder of Data Informed Impact, where I work with schools and educators all over to get rid of some of that overwhelm and make things a little bit easier for them to make the best decisions for their students. We'll be talking about all things data culture, data literacy, and data visualization. Let's get started. Mongrain. With a decade of experience as a history and leadership teacher, an MTSS coach, a restorative justice specialist, and now working in the professional learning department for Vancouver Public Schools, he has a wealth of knowledge to share. Patrick is passionate about moving beyond the shiny objects in education to build a lasting systemic change. We're going to dig into what it truly means to build a culture of data and coaching and why he believes instructional practice is at the heart of it all, and why I agree. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Jessica.
Yeah, so I gave a very brief overview there, as I usually do, but I'd love to hear a bit more about your background in education, starting from the beginning to now.
Ooh, great. I'll start with, I guess, that I think my first point or my first idea is that I think that in education, that really instructional practice is the most critical element. Students spend what 80% of their time, 85% of their time in the classroom with the teacher, and classroom interactions make up most of the interactions in schools. And I think I learned early in my career how critical instructional practice was. As a young teacher, I think I was mediocre at best. And in fact, sometimes I just ran into a parent of a student of mine my first year yesterday, and I kind of just felt uncomfortable and kind of wanted to apologize. And I
Go
think
there.
that, yeah, I quickly learned watching some amazing teachers around me and then trying to like grab as many activities or strategies as I could, learn my curriculum. And as I built that toolbox up, like I just felt like my brain was more like chaos. And then what I learned pretty quickly was it wasn't the what those teachers were teaching, although that is important. It was how they did it, how they interacted with their students, and how they installed routines and all of those things. And so I slowly learned to emphasize the how of teaching and learned that's kind of where I think the magic happens.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I had very, very similar first year where I was just, taking in as much as I could from the teachers who were having success around me. But it is a lot. And you know, it, it's funny when I talk about like data use and stuff. I always have to remind people, I'm like, you guys, I was not like an expert at this when I was in the classroom either. It's all about like growing and learning new ways of doing things. And I had a couple strategies that worked really well. But that doesn't mean that I was the best teacher in the building. Like we all have our strengths. And and so I did. I'm I'm kind of glad that I don't live in Chicago anymore and have not ran into any of the parents or students and have had to be like, oh, I'm sorry. But you know what's funny is I forget this all the time. I just remember this. So my first year I taught freshman math. My third year I taught junior math. I was getting those same students that I had taught my first year of teaching back in my class for junior math. And I was like, oh, shoot, I can only blame myself.
Yeah, sounds like a great opportunity to prove yourself, though, right?
Yes, it was. I was glad that at least at that point I had learned much more, and it was me who had the ability to kind of bring them up to speed and stuff. But um, I forget that story all the time. But yeah, it's kind of a unique situation where you get to feel the pain of your inexperience early on. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, exactly. I say all of the time, teachers learn things painfully, and that sounds a little painful. Relationships are so critical, right? Um,
Yes.
yeah, and you learn some strategies, but also like the story I tell is I remember maybe it was my third or fourth year, I went to the Socratic seminar training, so circle academic circle discussions at my dish. I missed 2 days of work and went to this training, and we had this amazing training where we participated in a seminar. We got a document about the science of learning. The teacher gave some investigative questions, and I was like, this is amazing. Like, I'm doing it with my students next week. So I think I got some things together over the weekend. Monday, did a little prep work with my kids. And then Tuesday, I throw my students in a seminar, give them put an investigative question on the board, and I'm like, talk about it. And you can guess exactly what seventh graders did, like when they were first staring awkwardly at each other in a circle. It was painful, right? But then I learned, right, you start the seminar with like a fun, safe, get to know you question, like what superpower would you choose? And then maybe you play a circle game to make students feel comfortable. And then maybe even deeper, you pre-teach them Costa's levels of thinking or depth of knowledge stems. And then when they start asking the questions, then it's more comfortable. Or you pre-teach them how to paraphrase each other so they kind of can roll into what they're going to say. So again, I learned like those routines that you have for circles and how you positively interact with students in the circles. Those are the things that made that strategy from like the most painful and awkward strategy I ever used, maybe, to some of the best moments I have teaching, right? Um, so yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting because I feel like as teachers, we've always been met with that moment where it's like we try something new and we're so excited about it and then it just goes so poorly. And then it becomes, the decision of like, do I go back to what's comfortable
Right.
or do I do what you did and realize that there's some stuff that needs to come before that and we need to kind of work our way up to it and put a little bit more thought into planning and getting the students ready. And it's such a tough decision when you're in the middle of it. So it sounds like you you went through with it and it ended up paying off. So that's cool.
Yeah, I think lucky enough in that situation, teaching 6 classes, I remember 4 or 5 of the discussions were great. And I was like, this is amazing. But there was 1 or 2 that were super uncomfortable. So I remember thinking like, what was so good with those classes, like I want to do this with everybody and reflecting and kind of, taking ownership over my part of it, to slowly get better. Right. And that's I think in fact, the kind of 2 points I make about instructional practices is I always use the quote, systems equals hope. I think when you have a system of practices in a classroom, that's really step one. And so I've kind of created a specific system for another reason for coherence, but that starts with community and relationships practices, intentionally planning routines, teaching expectations. Those are kind of the foundation. And then while you're observing students or supervising, how do you provide positive feedback, corrective feedback, and opportunities to respond? And then my last practices is targeted support strategies. That's kind of that MTSS in the classroom.
Mhm.
And so the way I phrase it is that again, that quote, systems equals hope. If you have a classroom that has really strong routines but no positive feedback, that might be orderly but feel cold, right?
Yep.
If you flip that and you have, a ton of positive feedback and great relationships, but no routines, that could be fun, but could also be chaos, right?
Yes, yep.
And so like that system gives you hope in like kind of diagnosing, my class feels contentious, I need to slow down and build community, or my class feels cold, I need to increase the positive feedback. Um, so I've not kind of, I've developed that system for that reason. I think that, when I was thrown into that seminar and I didn't really have an intentional plan for my system, I had the questions, I had the routines, I had a lot in place, but what I hadn't done in that situation is built community in that circle first. And it felt contentious and awkward. And so I started doing that. I was able to kind of diagnose and install a practice that made things better. So that's kind of my first point, as always, like systems equal hope. When you can make those diagnoses and quick changes, um, it can support a classroom.
Yeah, I love that. I love the breakdown of that. Do you have that written down somewhere or some kind of like matrix or something where it shows? Like, I feel like that would be beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I have YouTube videos and slideshows, and it's all there, which that matrix is, and it's a chapter in my book, that idea, right? But I kind of have two foundational matrices I go with those
Uh-huh.
practices. That's one is like which practices do what in a classroom, and how the classroom feels if it's not installed. And then the other one is that what I kind of one of my main points is that I'm lucky enough in my job right now. I have kind of a cool role where I spend about a third of my time at the district office working at systems, a third of my time actually mostly teaching classrooms now, which is cool while I'm coaching, and then a third of my time working with principals on building systems. And the way that I phrase it is I'm lucky enough I get to see the incredible things happening everywhere, right? At all levels of my school district. But what I also get to see is kind of this feeling of crisis everybody has. And I think we in education unintentionally have created that feeling of crisis by we care so much for students and we try to install these initiatives and components to our system to support students, but we've kind of created this chaos or disjointedness at least, that looks like for teachers, a new initiative every 3 to 9 months that they have to learn, and
Yep.
then they do it and maybe even don't even fully install it, and then something new comes down the pipe, and there's this constant feeling of initiative fatigue. Um, and so I've developed that system very intentionally to consider some of the really big initiatives that I've learned in the last few years. So, for example, like trauma-informed instruction. The two most critical points of a student or needs for a student impacted by trauma are having a relationship with somebody at school and going to school, knowing exactly what to expect. So community building practices and routines. And by the way, the biggest activator for a student impacted by trauma is corrective feedback that doesn't work for them, right? So um, MTSS is my first 7 practices plus that first wave of tier 2 in the classroom. When you're talking about language acquisition, it's really just increasing students' opportunities to respond in a safe way. PBIS is like, that those routines and expectations plus feedback. Um, and so I've really intentionally, restorative justice is, in fact, I'll do two more. Restorative justice is represented in community and relationships. Um, a big one I see a lot now is inclusionary practice or universal design. And the way that I phrase it is two things. One, you can't have like 3 options or variability for an entry task if your entry routine's in chaos. Like you need that routine installed. And then two, like, I'm not going to be able to design around your learning barriers until I build a relationship with you and learn what they are. So the community and relationships. Um, so I think like this system is informed by all of those initiatives that
Yeah.
I see across my desk. So instead of telling teachers like, you've got to learn these 5 huge ideas and change your mindset for all of them, you just have to install this one system.
Wow, that's so interesting. You're definitely gonna have to come back when your book is ready so that everyone knows. I this makes my brain so happy. Like I love categorizing things and stuff. I love it. So the idea of like, especially when it comes to those initiatives, to make them feel like they aren't just another new thing, but really just focusing a little bit more on different parts of that system, is wild, in a really great way. So I'm looking forward to that book. That'll be really neat to see, and to read. So
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Yeah, and like you said, like I've never seen an initiative in my education career that was new. It's really often just
right.
like a new brand of old practices, right? Um, and so that's, my tagline is always, we need to move on from quick fixes, shiny objects, and initiative fatigue, and just slow down and build systems. And can I add to that too, that I think that I want to make sure to say that, whoever it is that are making policy decisions, I think those people all have the best intentions at heart too, right? Like they love students and they want to do whatever they can to have a positive impact. Just sometimes like we're trying so hard to install all of these initiatives that it's done in
Yeah.
a way that maybe is a little bit disjointed. But then from a teacher's perspective, that feels like this constant revolving door, right?
Yep.
And so kind of got to build that coherence of a strong system.
Yeah, makes total sense. Okay, so I'm gonna put you on the spot and ask you if we're talking about, I want to say a data-informed initiative, but unfortunately, a lot of people call it data-driven initiative. Not unfortunately, it's just a different word. Um, if we're talking about like, oh, now we're data-driven, where does that fall?
Well, so I think that data's got to be weaved into all of those things, and the way that I would phrase it is that, um, well, I'll say two things. One, that the data informs that we need all of those initiatives. That's why we're installing them all, right? Like there's significant students in our schools that need support with language acquisition. So we install, 7 steps is amazing, right? I don't know if you've ever heard of that language acquisition curriculum. We installed that initiative. There's a lot of harm in our schools, so we install restorative justice, right? Like all of those initiatives are needed. And so the way that I phrase it is, our school systems are not simple. They're very complex and they need all of these components. It just needs to be done in a systematic way. And so we have to start with that foundation of building a system. Our students are way too diverse for any one solution. They need a system, I guess is how I would put it. And then two, when I talk about data, I think I have a little bit different mindset about data because I'm a part of many different groups, especially in my district office role where we're constantly analyzing student data. And what I have seen is we have so many different avenues to collect student data, belonging data, social emotional data, reading, math, whatever, all the state testing, right? And what I see is like all of that data over the last 10 or 15 years since I've been out of the classroom slowly trending down. And so what we need to do, my kind of perspective is that none of that's going to change until we start collecting data on ourselves. Um, in fact, so kind of my next layer is that if I've got this system of practices, how do you implement it? Especially, how do you implement it in a way where you're not just telling teachers what to do, but you're like teachers are amazing. Like the teachers I know are some of the most incredible people in the world, right? Like as a coach, I have a really
Absolutely.
hard time going into a classroom and kind of telling them what to do because I'm like, you're smarter than I am, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
most of the time,
so,
yes.
yeah, yeah. So like my point is that how we install that system is we collect data on those practices and that coaches teachers in a way that acknowledges them the experts. So for example, so I've done years and years of research of all of these different studies and I can kind of go through a little bit of the depth of it, but for each of those practices I named, there's a data point that's objective and measurable that could be thought of as optimal or that research and evidence points to as at least suggested. So for example, relationships, you want to have 85 to 95% of your students in the maintain phase of establish, maintain, repair by 4 to 6 weeks into school, the end of the honeymoon period. Routines, you need 80 to 90% engaged, says the RTI triangle. Um, I'll use positive feedback as an example because most people are familiar with the Gottman study, says 5 to 1 positive to negative interactions. PBIS says 4 to 1. In fact, I've seen studies that say 3 to 1. There's a study, and I can't remember the source that says like don't use any specific number because every class is different, but more positives are better. There's a study that says trauma informed is 7 to 1. There's a study that says it's counterproductive after 12 to 1. That's kind of like that toxic positivity, right? So I've done a lot of research on all of these data points, but if you're a teacher and I'm a coach and I want to support you, I can just sit in your class and tally P, P, P,
Yep.
N, P, N, and maybe I leave your class and you're at a 1 to 1 ratio. And then as a coach, we sit down together and I say, you're at 1 to 1 today. Like, how'd that feel? How'd your students respond?
Yep.
And to be honest, as the expert of your students, you might say, yeah, my students only need a 1 to 1 ratio. That's what I'm shooting for. And that's your decision because, again, you are the expert of your students and teachers are incredible. But maybe I say, like, well, let's look at some of these resources. You want to try to get to 4 to 1, and then you look at the resources and you choose what you want to do or what's going to work best for your students. And then the next day or next few days when you try that, um, and I come in a few days later and then I monitor you at 4 to 1. One, you were just the agent of your own learning. You made those
Yep.
decisions, and so that's where real profound growth happens. Two, you get to feel what 4 to 1 feels like. And also, when I say, like, how did your students respond to that? And you're like, oh, when I was positive, they were way more engaged, right? Um, like, that's where real profound growth happens. Um, because again, that objective data point, but also just acknowledging teachers as the experts they are, because they really are.
Yeah. Yeah. My favorite kind of coaching that I've done, because I've tried lots of different systems. I've been an instructional coach in three different districts. And each one, when I step in, they have their main system of coaching. Um, and the one that I've seen that's been the most impactful is when I'm able to just be the person who collects the data and facilitates or starts that conversation and helps them brainstorm it when they need it. Because you're so right. Like when they have that agency, when they have the ability to choose, then it helps make that, and this is something I talk about a lot about when it comes to like data cycles, it helps them connect their actions to the impact. And that's what we really want, right? Because then if you know that what you did had an impact on that student, that's giving you that teacher efficacy. That's
Yeah.
that's yeah, which is, as we all know, very powerful, especially when you start getting it all together as a group. But um but yeah, I talk about that all the time in terms of data cycles with teachers, when it comes to like academic data, and data cycles with schools and districts. The goal is to get to that point at the end where you're able to say, we did this and this is the impact that it had.
Right.
And that connection gives you like that dopamine and that excited motivation to do it all over again. And so it totally makes sense that when you're talking about coaching a teacher on instructional practices, it's the same thing. You're providing that data in order to help them make that connection, which then gets them excited about the impact that they're having. So cool.
Yeah, that's a great way to summarize it. I mean, I love that idea of efficacy and excitement, right? Because
Yeah.
teachers care, I say, like, desperately about their students, right? Um,
Right.
like that's all they want. They don't want somebody to come fix their problems. Um, they just want to see their students be successful. So when you build that efficacy, you see it in their eyes how excited they are. So I
Yeah.
love that point. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's, as a coach, that's what gives you efficacy when you see the teachers you're working with experience success on their own. Um, versus, the other side is that sometimes I think, like, traditional coaching can, maybe if I'm a coach at the district office and I teach a class, you come to my class at the district office, what I say might not even impact your kids, right? And if it does, and I just tell you what to do, the quote I use is repeating is not the same as creating. So, like, if I give you a lesson plan to teach, it just doesn't feel the same as one you create on your own. And I think
Absolutely.
that goes the same with instructional practices. You come to my class at the district office, I tell you what to do. It might not even apply, but if it does, and you just go repeat what I say, it kind of strips away all your personality and creativity. Um, and again, that doesn't feel great for a teacher. But when you come up with the idea, like, that's what feels really good when you
Yeah.
create your own solutions. Yeah, that brings that excitement for sure.
Yeah, and I may have talked about this on this podcast before. I repeat a lot of things because I talk to too many people. But I'm blaming it on the fact that I talk to too many people. Mostly it's just because I have a really bad memory. But I, oh shoot, see? Now I don't even know what I was gonna say.
Yeah, yeah,
No, I do. So, it reminds me of this article that I read. We were really big, the last job that I had, our teaching and learning team were really big about like staying on top of things, doing our own professional learning, and we would read these articles. And I'm pretty sure it was Jim Knight who wrote the article. It was all about the fact that like, teaching is such um a personal career. Like you put so much of your personality into it, so much of you into teaching, It's not just like this thing that's like separate from your life. It's like I don't know how to put it into words like you did, but it's very personal. So when it comes to someone coaching you or telling you what to do when you're a teacher, if it's something that you feel like you're being told like you're doing this wrong, it feels like an attack on your personality as opposed to just like an attack on some protocol that you're following, right? Like it's it's so deeply personal that it's so important that we get that coaching system down in a way that that nourishes the fact that we are putting our whole selves out there when we're teaching.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a really great point. Teachers are incredible. They deserve to be acknowledged as such. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so we've talked a lot about how collecting data can help with coaching on instructional practices, and you've been working a little bit on a software that can do the same, correct?
Yeah, yeah, I launched recently, so it launched in about June. I tested this app that I created last year in my coaching, and launched it in June. So people haven't used it in the classroom yet. I'm really excited for next week. But
Yeah,
I created this app called EdChanger Pro, and how it works really simply is what I just said about data collection. It really is kind of a personal instructional coach for teachers for $10, right? Where they can, and it works for coaching as well. But how the app is set up for each of those practices, there is what I actually call games. Because when you're sitting in a classroom and you're tapping all of these buttons, it kind of feels like you're playing a game on your phone. But there's a game for each. I mean, they're really data monitoring tools, right?
yeah.
I don't know. I'm a nerd. Some people like the word games better. Um, I'd call it a data monitoring tool if it was for me. But so for example, there's a data monitoring tool or a game for each of those practices. So I'll give you maybe 3 or 4 examples. For probably the simplest one is positive feedback. So if I'm a teacher, I can just carry my phone around like a clicker, and every time I say something, just tap P or N. And then at the end of the period or end of a 15-minute period, it's going to tell me my exact ratio of positive to negative interactions. Or if you're a coach, you can sit in the back of the classroom and do that for a teacher. Um, and the intentionally planning routines game is set up like a grid, like a classroom. So there's grid boxes, and then there's 2 buttons, engaged and disengaged. So I go around the classroom and I look at Jessica. I count, 1 to 3 seconds. You're engaged or disengaged. So I tap D or E, you're engaged. And then I look at Patrick. E, he's engaged. Then student 3 and student 4 are talking. So D disengaged, D disengaged. And so you go through the classroom twice, and it gives you the exact percentage of students that are engaged. Um, let's see, like the opportunities to respond game, you just start the clock and tap like G for gestural, V for verbal, W for written, which types of opportunities to respond they're being offered. We're shooting for 3 to 5 per minute. Um, to my favorite game, just because it's designed really cool. I have a coder who's a friend who designed all these things for me, and when he showed me this one, I was like, "Well, that's exactly what I wanted." You get a grid and you tap on the boxes to create a map of the classroom, like where desks are. And then you hit go, and like the grid disappears, but the map stays there. And then it's touchable. So you can like track your finger around the map where the teacher's supervision pattern is. Um, and then you can tap on P for positive feedback, C for corrective feedback, O for opportunities to respond each time the teacher offers a student interaction. And then so it emails the teacher their supervision map and what types of interactions they had. Um,
Wild.
yeah, last one that's
So
cool
cool.
is there's a student teacher talk time game. So you tap teacher talking, student talking, and you toggle back and forth, shooting for 70% student talk time, 30% teacher talk. And so what it does is it collects that data, and then as you hit done, it populates an email and it sends the teacher their data, the optimal or suggested data points. So it would send you, you were 1 to 1 positive to negative today. Optimal is 4 to 1. And then 3 targeted resources to support your growth. So the first one's like a webinar of me, like an 8-minute webinar of me teaching like first steps for implementation of that practice, maybe some fun ideas. Second one is like the most basic resource. So like for positive feedback, it's like, here's the six most important types of positive feedback: praising behavior, praising performance, praising thinking, praising effort or growth mindset, praising character. Like, so you can start to do that more.
Yeah.
And then the third is because one of my kind of beliefs is that like every teacher deserves great coaching. In fact, as you get more experience, sometimes you need more coaching or better coaching. And the third document is a resource framework that has like a ton of resources that kind of includes something for everybody. So if you hit that 4-to-1 ratio, but you're like, I still want to get better, that resource framework has like a resource about feedback loops. So you can install, maybe you start to want to target feedback loops as a practice, or a resource about empathy interviews. Maybe you want to use those in your classroom to ramp your positivity. Um, and so again, like that process of collecting data and then providing the teacher high quality resources really is a way to coach them to acknowledge them as experts. They go through the resources and make decisions. And by the way, teachers can monitor themselves. Like it's an instructional coaching app. So if you don't have access to a coach, maybe you have a coach, but you're not really that comfortable being that vulnerable with them. Um, you can coach yourself using the app. It's a personal instructional coach in your pocket for $10.
That's so such a neat concept and such a neat way to really like focus your growth, right? Because like I feel like it's so hard when you're in the midst of things to I remember keeping a list at the back of my planner like I need to work on this and this and this and this and this and that list just gets longer and longer and longer. But to be able to say, okay, this is what I'm working on and this is how I'm working on it and whether or not what I'm doing is having an impact is just so beneficial. Um, it makes me wish that I had that when I was a teacher. Like that would have been so cool.
Yeah.
Especially too, even if you have like a co-teacher and you guys are working on something together and you can like monitor each other and then look at the data and I mean, you'd have to have a strong relationship with your co-teacher, obviously, um, but find a way to kind of work together and collaborate um on growing together. That's so neat. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I love that. You're always going to learn more with other people for sure. But although if you're somebody who's not comfortable with
Yeah, you
sharing that
still
data, you need to, right? I tell principals all the time, I mean, the way that I would phrase it is that everybody talks about like differentiating PD, but like you say that, but what does that even mean? And who does it, right? It's usually
right.
just one consultant that comes in that teaches one
Yep.
thing at a time. But you could, as a principal, if you have Wednesday staff meetings, tell your teachers, pick a practice. I'm going to monitor you on Monday. And then at the staff meeting, you're just going to group up with the people who chose the same practice as you,
Yeah.
watch the webinar and talk about like what you could do to refine your practice or share ideas with each other. Again, teachers are going to learn the way that in fact, I think I directly say in my book, like, please collaborate on this. You're going to learn much more from the experts around you than you ever are from a book, right? So
Right.
that collaboration also leads to profound growth. Yeah, love that idea.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, what an awesome idea. There's another question I was gonna ask you about it. Oh, in turn, you said for $10. So where do people find this? How do they connect to this app?
Yeah, it's just on the App Store. The app's called Ed Changer Pro. Ed
Ad
Changer
Changer, all one
Pro,
word.
all one word. Yep, EdChanger, whatever. Ed Changer Pro. Um, I also have a YouTube channel with all of my webinars, so those are free. In fact, again, one of my points I always make, and it's, kind of idealistic, I guess, but I try to stay grounded in that, right? Um, is that like every teacher deserves great coaching. And so like if you don't have $10 or if you can't access the app for some reason, all my resources are online for free. So there's webinars on YouTube. I have that a hub of resources on Google Drive, which is all the resources I just described to you. But what they also include, that resource framework I mentioned, has like a paper monitoring form. So if you can't access the app, you can download the paper monitoring forms and just,
Yeah.
PPPN on paper. All of that's free. Again, all teachers deserve great coaching. All students deserve great instruction. So if you can't access the app, all of that stuff is there for free.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Very low entry points. You know, you can still still get that focused growth regardless, which is really cool. But the idea of having it as a little tapping game.
I'm gonna tell you. I mean, I say it all the time, and I'm not a salesman at all, right? And I'm not trying to make money or whatever. Like I have a job, I'm busy, right? This is just it really is a little bit more idealistic for me. But I'll tell you that, and I always say like all those things are free, but I will tell you that it's so much easier to use the
Right.
app and just email the resources versus have to like put a piece of paper in the teacher's box and hope they get it and or whatever it is, right? Like if you can just tap 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 send, it's so worth $10 for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I just to go back to the whole game idea. I love it. Like, I love the idea of just like, oh, it's just a little game that I'm playing while teaching.
Yeah.
Um, uh, yeah, so cool. Okay, so we talked about the app. I do want to just make sure that we're covering, and I linked the app in the show notes as well as your YouTube channel. You also mentioned that. Is there anything else that you want to? I know we're going to talk about the book. You're going to come back and talk about the book because I'm excited about that. Is there anywhere else that people should follow you to make sure that they don't miss out on all of this cool stuff?
Yeah, thanks. I just I'm posting July or whatever when I started this, I just signed up for LinkedIn. So I post almost every day like a strategy and a resource on LinkedIn. I at this point, all of my resources I just a couple weeks ago created. It's called a bio site. So everything I have is just right
Okay,
there
yeah.
on my bio site. There's a link to the YouTube channel, the hub, and all my resources, the app. So I can share that link with you if I haven't. So yeah, I
Yes.
would say like follow on LinkedIn just because I'm constantly kind of coaching one strategy per day, and then also the bio site is just all of the resources.
Yeah, awesome. I'm gonna have to, I don't think I follow you on LinkedIn, so we're gonna have to connect there.
Oh, okay.
It's
Yeah.
such a great place. It's so much easier to connect on LinkedIn than Facebook.
Yeah. Yeah.
So less clutter. So super cool. Thanks for giving us those links. And thanks so much for coming on and talking about all this stuff. It's such a great conversation to have. We talked a lot. Me, myself, and I have talked to a lot of people about about data use when it comes to academics, behavior, attendance, but something that we don't talk about enough is the instructional strategies data, the coaching data, that data that helps you kind of uh like I said, focus on your specific actions as opposed to the content itself. So I appreciate you coming on and talking about that. I'm excited about this app. I'm excited to share it with the audience, and I look forward to having you back to talk about the book.
Yeah, thank you. That'd be awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you.
Well, my friend, did you enjoy it? I'm really hoping the answer is yes. And like every other podcast out there, I'm going to ask you for some big favors. Can you please make sure that you're subscribed? You don't want to miss the next episode, I promise. And then if you could leave a review, that'd be awesome too. If you're on YouTube, by the way, there's this great thing that you can do where you just like go to the box underneath the video and type in your thoughts, ideas, wishes, hopes, dreams, and hit comment. And it shows up under the video. It is public, just a warning. But I'd really love for you to do that. Share with me. What did you think about the episode? Or what are your dreams in life? It's okay. You can really leave any kind of comment. And I'll do my best to respond. Above all else, I appreciate you listening, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.